Hello everybody, Alyne Hart here, and what we're going to be talking about today is the stigma that is attached to writing romance. The stigma attached to romance is very real. It's something that's been around for a really long time. It's been around since the bodice ripper days of romance with the Fabio-like covers and the bare-chested men wearing pirate costumes, which, side note, pirates are hot AF. It goes back to the days of women having to hide the covers of the books they were reading because they were embarrassed. In the 80s, if a woman was having sex with a man she didn't love in a romance novel, the sex couldn't even be consensual. A woman literally was not allowed to have her own sexual identity and enjoy sex that wasn't with a monogamous partner. Being sexual as a woman back then wasn't something that was appropriate or okay or ladylike or even celebrated. So let's talk a little bit about romance. Romance is big business. In fact, romance is a $1.08 billion industry and growing. That's roughly 43% of the book industry is all romance. Romance is an industry dominated by women. It is mostly women writers writing for mostly women readers. The core audience of romance is 29 million readers, growing strong every day. The readers are 84% female, and of that, 41% of them are between the ages of 30 and 54. Romance is an umbrella word that encompasses many subgenres, including contemporary romance, historical romance, regal romance, there's Amish romance, inspirational romance, Christian romance, sweet romance, romantic suspense, if I didn't say that already. There's so many things that it encompasses. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that people say to us romance writers, and let's get these stigmas out of the way. So let's talk about some of these things, because I know that when I tell people I write romance, I am often made to feel less than. And by that, I mean that I am made to feel less educated, less classy, and less evolved than other writers. I'm made to feel like I'm just some kind of bored housewife who isn't satisfied with my life. And you know what? I'm calling bullshit. So let's get started with the stigmas. That we must write these kind of books because we are bored and unsatisfied with our real lives. Now, I can't speak for every single romance writer. There may be some who are writing these things because they are bored and unsatisfied with their lives. But the majority of us are not. We are real people in real relationships with real jobs. We enjoy our lives. We enjoy our husbands, our boyfriends, and our partners. We enjoy most aspects of our life, just like anyone else. The reason we write books like this is because we find it enjoyable, we have fun, and it's entertaining to us. And that's about it. The next stigma is that we write these things because we are depraved, we are perverted, and we must do all of the things that we write about in our books, or that we're writing about our own sexual escapades or our own sexual fantasies. Once again, I can't speak for all romance writers, but what I can tell you is that this is probably the furthest thing from the truth. I like sex. I like sex maybe more than the average person. I like talking about sex. I like making sexual jokes. But I'm definitely not writing about my own sexual experiences or my own sexual fantasies. As a writer, I have an imagination. And as a writer, I write the kind of sex that the characters I create would be having. So whether they're having wild, crazy, monkey sex, or whether they're having sweet, passionate sex, or maybe they're doing things that are beyond the norm or things that I wouldn't even do. I write sex that goes with my characters, that goes with my stories, and it definitely has nothing to do anything with my life. As a writer of romance, and people who know that I write steamy romance books, I have been approached with a myriad of insane questions about my sex life in particular, or my methods of research. You would never approach a writer who writes crime novels and ask them if they've ever killed someone to research for their book. You would probably never approach a science fiction writer and ask them if they've ever gotten on a spaceship or even built a robot. Something that wouldn't even cross your mind. So why is it okay to ask a romance writer if they're writing about their own sex life? It's intrusive and it's rude. I have been asked about one book in particular if I was writing about myself and two of my ex-boyfriends. First of all, no, that's just weird. Second, I have an imagination and I can come up with new characters on my own. And third, No, ew, that's just weird. Stop asking us about our sex lives. Stop asking us about our methods of research. And for God's sake, stop asking us about our sexual fantasies. And please, for the love of everything good and holy, weird dudes, please stop DMing us and asking us about our sex lives and asking us if we like anal sex or something else really entirely inappropriate and weird. As much as I like talking about sex, no. The next stigma is that we aren't writing real books and that all of our books are the same and we have no imagination. Are you seeing a theme here? I think this boils down to the 50 Shades of Grey thing, which will be coming up in a second. But as soon as 50 Shades hit the market, romance itself just kind of exploded. And yes, there were a lot of writers trying to piggyback off of her success. All of a sudden, BDSM books were all the rage, and romance was something that people talked about. I will tell you for myself, and the many authors that I know, we are writing real books. We are writing real plots with real subplots, and we're taking time to think them out thoroughly. We're thinking about our characters, we're thinking about our dialogue, we're thinking about every scene and every moment in our books. And that doesn't make them any less real than any other author. So let's move on to the next stigma. Oh, is your book like 50 Shades of Grey? Can this one end? Immediately. If I hear this one more time, I might actually stab myself in the eye with a spoon. That was really graphic. Sorry. But seriously, I have had very well-meaning friends trying to help me sell my books by explaining it to their friends by saying, oh, kind of like 50 Shades of Grey. My books are literally nothing like 50 Shades of Grey. In fact, most of the romance novels that I read are nothing like 50 Shades of Grey. Stop comparing us all to 50 Shades of Grey. We are not all E.L. James, and while she's highly successful and I applaud her for everything that she's accomplished, not all of us are trying to piggyback off of her success. I don't even think any of my books even have a spanking, and nary a Benoit ball. Just because 50 Shades of Grey was probably one of the biggest romance novels to explode off the market doesn't mean that that's what we're all writing. The next stigma is, you don't write those kind of books, do you? I imagine that statement being followed by some pearl-clutching grandma with a handkerchief in her pocket. What do you mean by those kind of books? Do you mean books where people kiss? Oh no. Do you mean books where people fall in love and have hot sex? Oh my. What exactly do you mean by those kind of books? Look, I'm writing a romance book, and in a romance book I have people who fall wildly in love. And I think that if you fall wildly in love, you should be having some pretty hot sex to go along with it. And you know what? I'm gonna write it. And I enjoy writing it. Everyone I know knows what I write because I'm not ashamed of it, and I shouldn't have to be. My mom knows what I write, my brother knows what I write, my kids know what I write, my boss knows what I write, and almost all of my coworkers know what I write. And I am proud to say that I'm a romance author. If I was writing something darker or more like erotica, I might not let everyone know because maybe that's not something that would go along with my real life. But to be truthful, I like what I write. First book signing was in the office at my work. It's just not something that bothers me, and it's not something that bothers most of the writers that I know. So please, what do you mean by those kind of books? Keep your pearl clutching to yourself. Next stigma that we hear a lot is, you aren't a real writer. What do you define as a real writer? I sit down and I get a pen and paper and I plot out my books pretty thoroughly. Then I sit down and I write a book. And then I revise my book and I revise it again and I edit it and I proofread it. Tell me how that is not a real book. A real book is something that was written by an author, plotted out, thought about carefully. A real writer struggles with every word that they put down on paper. A real writer doesn't sleep for days on end. A real writer has manic writing sessions where they're drinking way too much coffee and they can't sleep because they can't stop writing. So I don't really know what you mean by a real writer. If you're comparing me to Shakespeare or something else like that, then maybe not. But a real writer is someone who sits down every single day and they do something they love and they do it with passion, and that for me is writing. And that does not make me not a real writer. The next stigma is, Don't you want to write about something more important? Well, maybe romance to me is important. Look, romance isn't about handsome, hunky, smiling alpha males and doormat, mousy, tinkling-voiced females. Romance deals with a lot of heavy topics. I've seen romances that deal with things like infertility and cancer. I've seen romances that deal with things like a Marine coming home with PTSD, and I've seen romance dealing with things like depression, alcoholism, and all kinds of things. If I write a story that touches me and touches someone else, then how am I not writing something important? Just because I'm not writing about some heavy-hitting topic, writing something that ends with a happily ever after, doesn't make it less important than anything else. This is the next big one that I hear. Why are all the men so unrealistic? Let's just face the facts. The men in romance books are predominantly these hot and sexy alpha males. They have eyes that can melt your panties off, and they have smiles that make you grow wet in an instant. An alpha male in a romance book usually has that V-line thing going on in their groin, and they've got chiseled abs and broad chests, and they're probably really tan, and they have amazing fucking hair all the time. But once again, it's an escape from reality. Speaking for myself and the women that I know who write romance books and the women that I know who read romance books, this is not what we expect in reality. And after reading one of these books or seeing one of these guys on a cover, it isn't gonna make me not want a real man. In real life, I want a real man. And if a real man has a dad bod or back hair, or sometimes has body odor and doesn't have that sexy V-line, it's not gonna make me any less attracted to him. Humans by nature are very visual creatures. Back to the days when men were looking at Sports Illustrated swimsuit calendars and women were up in arms about, well, that's not realistic. That's not what real women look like. Well, it's just the same as complaining that the men in romance books aren't real and that's not what real men look like. It's a fantasy, it's an escape. Whether you're in a relationship or not, we all like to look at attractive people. But at the end of the day, that doesn't mean that you aren't attracted to reality and things that are real. As a woman, just because I read a romance novel that has a guy with a 12-inch cock doesn't mean that I'm gonna go out expecting that every time I meet someone. In a romance novel, the guy is always bold and direct and he says what he means and he chases after you hard. He always calls when he says he's going to, and he forgives you every time you flake out on him. In a romance novel, the men are pretty clear-cut. They know what they want, they go after it. In a romance novel, a guy usually comes after you pretty hard, and even if there's mixed signals, they always get worked out in the end. I enjoy reading about this kind of thing. Once again, it doesn't mean that at the end of the day, I'm not gonna be swiping right on the guy with a dad bod. On to the next stigma. Anyone can write about sex. It takes real talent to write something else. First of all, if you think that you can outright me in a sex scene and you've never written one before, challenge accepted. I'll tell you what, it actually takes a lot of talent to write a really good sex scene. And just because I'm writing romance does not mean that I'm writing all about sex. In an 80,000 word book, I usually only have 3 to 4 scenes that are sexual in nature. Everything else is pure story. The romances that I enjoy reading, that's typically the case. So no, we aren't writing just about sex. And it does take a lot of talent to write one. If you don't know how to write one, you're probably gonna wind up writing what I call IKEA sex. And it's not gonna be hot, and it's not gonna be sexy, and it's not gonna be any good. Just like anything else, it takes a lot of practice and a lot of hard work to write it. Next thing that I get asked all the time, do you get turned on when you write? First of all, no. Second of all, none of your damn business. I'm thinking too hard about what I'm writing to really think about getting turned on. I'm not writing it to get turned on. So please, stop asking me that question. Next stigma. Romance is formulaic and boring. I will give you that romance does have a formula, but I don't think that it's boring. The regular romance formula goes a little something like this. Boy and girl meet, you have a little meet cute. There's a kind of little push and pull where boy and girl can't really get together and they're sort of flirting around with the idea. Then boy and girl get together. Hot, sexy times. Good times had by all. Then something happens, boy and girl split apart. Oh no, dark moment, so many tears, boy and girl break up. Boy makes huge romantic gesture, girl takes him back, happily ever after. Like that, right? If you do it right, no one notices the formula. So yes, there is a formula to romance, but it's not something that always has to be right on point. It doesn't have to follow all those little dots. And I think that if you do it well, the formula really kind of disguises itself into a good story. As far as romance being boring, I beg to differ. Real romance goes something like this. No one has texted me all day, and now suddenly my phone won't stop going off. Props to my boy Josh Burdick. Everyone knows him. Everyone loves him. Thank you for making me smile tonight, Joshua. Where were we? Real romance goes something like this. Girl swipes right on Tinder. Boy swipes right on Tinder. Conversation is had. Lots of flirty fun ensues. Then boy disappears. Real romance goes something like this. Boy smiles at girl. Girl smiles at boy. Flirty times ensue. Then boy decides he isn't really sure if he likes you or not, and he disappears. Sometimes the romance works out. You go on some dates, there's a little bit of kissy-kissy, sexy times had by all. Maybe you fall in love. And then the romance kind of turns into something like this. What do you want for dinner? I don't know. What do you want for dinner? Chicken sounds good. Chicken sounds really good. That's how relationships work. Want to go see a movie? I would love to see a movie. What do you want to see? I don't know. What do you want to see? Oh, whatever. What looks good? I don't know. What do you think looks good? That's how relationships work. Relationships work like this. Seriously, why did you leave your goddamn socks on the floor again? Don't you know what a hamper looks like? Real romance looks like this. Babe, I'm playing Xbox with the guys. I don't want to watch a chick flick tonight. If you just felt pigeonholed, that's kind of how I feel as a romance writer. Real romance is wonderful, it's magical, and it's amazing, but it doesn't always work for a book. I don't want to write about trying to get my dude to stop playing Xbox by getting naked and having to stand in front of him and basically unplug the machine to get some attention. I don't want to write about fighting over whose turn it is to do the dishes or whose turn it is to take the kids to school. That's what real romance is. And the romance that I write is an escape from all of that. My romances I'm writing, everyone swipes right, sexy times for all, good times are had every single time. And that's not always a reality. So if you call romance formulaic and boring, then think about what real life is like and take a second look. The last one that I've heard is that you can't learn anything from romance. And once again, I'm going to beg to differ. In a romance, you learn that communication is key, not something that happens every time you're in a relationship. In a romance, communication is everything. Whether someone is talking about hurt feelings or talking about feeling ignored or let down, there's always some big conversations to be had where people bare their souls. They let those walls down and they let someone in. Maybe conversations are had about their pasts, and maybe conversations are had where trust is gained. But in a romance, you learn communication is everything. In a romance, you learn that sex is healthy, good, and fun. In a romance, women can be sexual without being judged. In a romance, you learn about forgiveness. There's always a lot of forgiveness in romance, whether it's forgiveness over past hurts, whether it's forgiveness over current hurts, or forgiveness over things that have happened in your life. Forgiveness is huge, and it is definitely something that you learn about in romance books. In romance, you learn how to overcome obstacles. In a romance, lovers will risk everything just to be together. In the end, they're rewarded with emotional satisfaction and a happily ever after. And in a romance, you learn to fight for what you want. It's not something that happens in everyday life. Again, in everyday life, there's a lot of emotional baggage, a lot of inner turmoil, and people don't always fight for everything that they want because they're afraid. In a romance, you learn that sometimes you have to fight for those things that you want. If you are a writer or reader of romance, I would love to hear in the comments section or even in an email about some of the stigmas and shame that you've felt for writing and reading what you love and what you're passionate about. As romance writers, I think that we need to stand strong and teach people every single day that we're not all writing the same books and that romance does have its place in literature. Romance is wonderful, it's fun, it's exciting. And I, for one, will never change what I write because I absolutely love doing it. If you enjoyed today's video, please give me a thumbs up and hit that little subscribe button. If you want to get notifications every time I post something new, hit that little bell up in the top corner. Until next time, I'll see you later.